Hey there, my name's Donovan, and I work over here at Johnson Photo Imaging. I teach a lot of the classes. Some of you keep asking me about the camera that I use. I use a Panasonic S5 II. It's Lumix, and it's a great little camera that I like. It takes some great pictures. I call it Bob, and I have a lens that's the Sigma 50 millimeter 1.4 art lens. I call it Bert. So Bob and Bert are my things. So settings. So typically what I like to do. So for most part, what I got is the camera plugged into my camera, so you can see the live view here on the screen, which you're kind of looking down at. There's the camera. There's the computer. So right now it's looking at this. So, and then I also have the settings, which you can kind of see over here on the right-hand side. So the idea is what I'm doing is I'm showing you how I typically have the settings for my cell phone. Right now, the focus mode is set to autofocus as single. So that's what I usually shoot. Right now, it's set to tracking so it can find me. That's why you see all these little boxes. I know it's kind of distracting. So that's what you're seeing right there, because I'm looking through the camera's live view on this thing. So there you go. I can change this stuff around if I want to different focusing options. As a general rule, I usually, if I'm doing people, I'd be tracking. So I can select where they're going to be. I can try to say, well, look over there, but no, it's looking for the people. Oh, I found the people. So it's defaulting to people right now. So if I go to here, see, it's still finding people. Why don't you go over here? Look at that. Okay, now it's looking at that. Now your eyes are kind of watering. Looking over here now. All right, there we go. So as long as I stay within the zone, I should be fine. But when I'm doing people, I prefer to be tracking their eyes, and so that way I stay in there. Typically, as a rule, that doesn't mean I do this all the time, but as a rule, I like shooting things with a shallow depth of field. So I typically have things at 1.4. Right now, the camera is set to Aperture Priority. So with Aperture Priority, you're going to have a shallow. That's why the background is super soft. Now, if I want to, of course, I can easily go in this particular screen, go down to, let's say, 16. Now, right now, the camera is going to modify the shutter speed for me, and so it's going to make that adjustment for me, so which is kind of cool, which is what I will usually do here. Now you can see it's modifying that. The ISO is now set to auto, so it's also going to make that modification for me. As a rule, if I'm shooting this, if I have enough light in the area that I'm shooting at, that's not a big deal. It's not going to be, I don't really care. The ISO auto usually is not going to go past, say, 6400 for me, which is, again, with this camera, it's not a big deal. With ISOs being the way they are these days, ISOs at 6400, no one really cares these days. It's not that big of a deal. So again, leaving it in auto, I don't care. If I was to be, say, shooting at 51,200, that would be a big difference. And you can see right there, that already jumped to 5,000 on the shutter speed to make a big difference. I don't know if you can see it, but it is a little bit more grainy in the picture here, but we won't do that. We'll go back to auto, so that's fine. The white balance, I generally don't really tweak too much on the white balance. If I'm going to do anything with the white balance, I might shift to the warm spectrum. I'm going to still tweak the white balance a little bit later on in editing. But for the most part, it's not something I'm going to be doing any significant changes to. Some people like to do it. For the most part, no. I'm going to leave it there on auto for right now. If I want to do any changes to this particular exposure, because I don't like what this change or this change is doing, I'm going to be going down to your exposure compensation. And this is only and only if I stay in Aperture Priority. This would be true if I was in shutter priority or if I was in program. So if I was going to be going down to here, this will then make it darker. Now, this is an extreme example, making it super dark. This would also be an extreme example if I was going to make it super bright. So normally I wouldn't do that. I would only be sticking around up in here between -1 and +1. This all depends on shadow details. So looking around the eyes, the mouth, in this particular, me, looking around here for shadow details and highlights. So if I got a hot spot up here, or if I feel like this is too hot right there, then what I could do is I could say, well, I think this needs to come down a little bit, and that way I can make the modification that way. Then that's what I would do. The camera would then compensate with these couple of changes right there. I'm going to put it back to there. Again, I usually leave it on RAW. I don't usually do RAW and JPEG. The only time I shoot RAW and JPEG these days is if I'm doing for a class for comparison's sake. Occasionally, I'll get somebody that wants a JPEG right away, but for the most part, they can wait a day or two. If that's the case, I'm typically shooting RAW, and I'll just export them in JPEG later on. I've been shooting mostly video, some video, but to be honest with you, 4K video is usually all they really need, so I don't really have to mess around with that too much. This is how I primarily work. This is about 80-ish% of most of my stuff. I might change the aperture around here and there depending on what it is. Remember, aperture, depth of field, distance matters. If you're not familiar with that, just, I'd go over that in a future thing, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that's pretty much the gist of it. All right, if anybody has any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and if you want to learn more, I do a huge class, I do a longer classes about understanding exposure and things like that. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in some of the classes. Thanks.